with some important news. Apparently, people around the Tallahassee community, along with students, faculty, and staff at Florida State University, are demanding to know about this hot topic: emergency management business contingency programs in the private sector. When people hear private sector and contingency programs, they don't typically think that the government could come in and intervene. However, that's not always the case. The federal government encourages cooperative relationships between the private sector organizations and state, tribal, and local authorities regarding prevention, preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery activities. The federal government encourages processes that support informed, cooperative decision-making. It takes actions that engage the private sector at the strategic and operational levels to ensure effective and efficiency use of private sector and federal resources, timely exchange of information, and public and market confidence in times of crisis or catastrophe. The federal government also encourages extensive two-way communication between the private and public sector of operational information and situational awareness relative to potential or actual incidents. That way, if they're both communicating, they can share valuable information and make sure that the crisis is resolved. The federal government encourages owners and operators of those infrastructure elements whose disruption may have national or regional impact. No matter if you have a national or regional impact or simply a small impact, if you are a business that is large enough to help the community, it is in dire need that you do so. Also, the federal government tends to avoid actions that disrupt existing relationships between voluntary aid providers at the local, tribal, or state national level when eliciting additional efforts or goods and services. Also, though, when you hear disaster or crisis, people want to typically know what is the actual plan that will be implemented to help the community. The federal government supports measures that ensure the accessibility of essential service providers responding to disaster or emergencies. These entities provide telecommunications services, electrical power, natural gas, water and sewer services, or any other essential needs that anybody may need, and as determined by the president. Also, with private sectors, you could have a large corporation, or you could have a small business or a locally owned restaurant. In those cases, local restaurants would typically close down if a catastrophe happened. However, in their planning process, when they're building their restaurant, say here in the South, they want to make sure they have hurricane, windows, you're elevated, you're not at sea level. So that's their implementation of their planning. With other private sector businesses, like any 24-hour services, you want to make sure that you have a plan and process, because people are going to be, panicking, and they're going to want to go to those 24 hours and get the things that they need. So no matter if you're a large corporation or a small privately owned business in a local town, you want to make sure that you have these things planned and ready to be implemented whenever is needed. Private entities such as business and industry associations develop, validate, and exercise and implement security and business continuity plans to ensure their capability to deliver the goods and services. Private sector owners and operators in many locations coordinate plans for security and contingency programs for the state, tribal, and local entities. Also, with ongoing actions, private sector entities and responsibilities for the repair, restoration, and security of their property and must first seek reimbursement for disaster losses for insurance or other sources. Federal disaster assistance may be available primarily in the form of low-interest disaster loans from the U.S. Small Business Administration. So, therefore, depending on how big the private sector business is, where it's located, and what the business has to do with that all has to do with the implementation of the plan. And what exactly is a plan? For example, not all private sectors are the same, like I explained earlier. Whatever the case may be, there needs to be a plan in place that would be effective during a crisis, whether that's your own plan for being a small local business or whether it has been a regional impact and the federal government does need to get involved.